This is Bobby Craig doing another video lecture, starting us on part 6 of our text, and this is basically music since the 1900s. Before this point we were in the 1800s, also known as Romanticism, but once we flip over to the 1900s we get into something called Modernism. And quite frankly, Modernism has no rules. You can do anything you want, pretty much, and call it music or art or whatever. And for example, music came in and did so many things new and creative and outside the box of normal that someone created this caricature over here of Arnold Schoenberg. You can see him in the middle. He's continuing to conduct. But if you look at the orchestra back here, they're using their instruments basically as weapons. And then you've got other people that are rioting and running from the scene. And this actually is a depiction of another composer. Who is that? It says right here. Schubert, depiction of Schubert, who is basically being knocked over. So it's this idea of modernism coming in and just sweeping across everything and no one really liking it, which was fairly true at premieres, but the more people began to see the why behind and understand the music a little bit better, there came to be a little bit more of an acceptance of it. Now, it's difficult to really talk to you about the sound of modern music. We're going to listen to a lot of it, of course, but I want to relate it to the art of modernity. So, for example, we have this piece of artwork. Can anybody tell me what you see in this piece of artwork? Well, yes, some of you probably might have said a violin. Some of you might have said grapes. Okay, now there's a couple things that give you some hints and clues. We do have some circles down here that sort of look like grapes. We do have sort of this shape of the violin. We've got these F holes that the violin has. Actually, this might even be a cello because it looks like it's got the post the cello sticks on. Here's the stock at the top of the tuning fork, or tuning pegs. And this is Picasso, and this is something called abstract impressionism. And basically it's the idea of just giving you the impression of something. He's not painting for you a violin and grapes. He's painting for you an impression of violin and grapes. So you may or may not see a violin and grapes here, but his painting is trying to depict an impression of that. Let's see, where's the other one of impressionism? Okay, yeah, this one is Claude Monet, and this is called Impressions Sunrise. Very famous impressionism, and one of the things that you can see here, this is not abstract impressionism, this is just straight impressionism. And one of the things that he does here is you see that basically he's just got these quick little brush strokes here and there. Quick little brush stroke, quick little brush stroke, quick little curve here, and we got our sun, and a quick little stroke, maybe a little bit more work here in the black for the little boat, or is that a boat? I don't know. What are we at? Are we at a dock? Are we at a, is this another boat back here? Is that cranes? What is this thing? Is this another boat? Anyway, the idea here is he didn't really paint anything but a bunch of little swishes and a bunch of little brush strokes. But he wanted to give you the impression of a sunrise over a bay or over some sort of water. And I think he pretty much accomplished that, giving you this impression. So here's the next one, and this one is called Expressionism. This was Edward Munch, and this is called Scream. Pretty famous painting. Well, Expressionism was all about displaying one expression. If you remember when we talked about opera, we talked about different songs having one effect that they wanted to display, one emotion. Well, in the same way, the one emotion here might be fear. Is that what this face is trying to give you the expression of? Or surprise, maybe? So Expressionism was all about one emotion. There's a lot of Expressionist paintings, and you can find that in many places. The next one I want to show you is strange, and this is Kandinsky, and it's called Storm. It's like in improvisation number 7, I think. Now, what this is a little bit crazy in some ways to what he's trying to accomplish. He's obviously not trying to give you the impression of a storm. He's not trying to show you any expression. He's not giving you any sort of realism, you know, like normal paintings that are paintings of people on horseback riding through the woods, where you know exactly what it is. There's no guessing. Now, what he's doing here is basically trying to get you away from, I guess, away from any meaning. He's not trying to get you to see anything here. Now, why did he call it storm? Maybe he had in his mind that it sort of looked like some sort of storm. But the idea in this style of modern art really was to just be interested in shapes, be interested in colors, be interested in how those things might work together on a canvas. And you, the viewer, would kind of surmise your own meaning out of this painting. So, do you see a storm? Do you see something else? Do you see a guy on horseback? It's very, it's okay for basically any of those to be correct. So those are a couple things about the artwork, visually, of modernism. Now, if you try and take some of these things and relate it to music, so now you're trying to give an abstract impression of something musically. Well, how do you do that? Do you take it apart, kind of like this violin is taken apart? How do you get to the sound you want to get to? How do you create a melody in this style of thinking? When you're looking at something like this, excuse me, of an impression of something, how do you do that musically? Even more so when you get over to Expressionism, how do you express one emotion in this new style of thinking? Or even over here on this, how do you not use form? How do you not use the materials that we've used before, notes and rhythms, or use them in such a way that they don't really represent anything recognizable? Just like this guy. He uses green, he uses orange, he uses white, he uses some blue, black in here, he's got some lines, he's got some shapes. But is he really representing anything? Is he representing a shape, representing an object, representing a scene? How do you do that musically? And so that's the question I want you to think of as we listen to the music of the 20th century and beyond. But a couple things that I want to share with you too. Audio technology just went through the roof during this time frame. In 1877, Thomas Edison invented the cylinder disc. And basically it was a wax cylinder, sort of like a can. And you would put this wax can on this thing that would spin sort of like a lathe. And basically you had the needle that would come down, and the needle on the end of this this phone basically would create vibrations. So as you spoke into this phone, the needle would create vibrations in that wax cylinder. Well, then you could take the wax cylinder and dry it, put it on another machine that would rotate the cylinder the opposite direction, and now you put the needle down and the needle would recreate the sound that you've recorded. Well, of course, that was just phenomenal. We had never had any sort of recording technology before. Well, it didn't take him but a few years, maybe about 10 years or so, before he was able to invent the record player. In a similar way, now the disc is going around in a circle instead of rotating on a central axis. And in that circle, basically on that record, it worked the same way. The needle would put down into the vinyl. It would put down it would record the mountains, the peaks and valleys of the sound, and basically record the sound. Then you turn the record player on the opposite direction, and it begins to play the sound that you've recorded. I just noticed here's 1897, so it was about 20 years later, not 10 years later. Well, then, after you've had these ability for recordings on the record players, now you could share recordings. So some artist could go and he could record his own record or own album with 3 or 4 songs on it, and he could copy it. And now he could go to any music store and said, hey, would you sell my record instead of my sheet music? And now sounds began to be sold and shared. And so now you're no longer sharing the music, the sheet music. Hey, Joe, did you hear that new piece by Chopin? Yeah, go buy the new sheet music. I got it just last night. No, now you're sharing a record. Did you hear the recording of Chopin's last piano piece? That is a totally different way of sharing music. Then you get over about 20 years later, and in the early 20s, you start to have something called the radio. And they figured out how to transmit sound over radio waves. One side transmits the sound and the other side receives the sound, which is why we call our radios receivers nowadays. And basically just about any type of music, any type of audio could be transmitted over the airwaves. And that changed everything as far as how we shared music and how we listened to music. It changed everything. And then you think of today, back in 2001, the Apple iPod was invented or first brought to market. And think about that, 2001, we're talking 16 years ago. What you've got today, being able to carry around thousands of pieces of music in your pocket, in your phone, no less. And here, only 15 years ago, you couldn't do that. 16 years ago. It's an amazing feat to where we've come in this 100 years' time. And so the sharing of music just was a phenomenal new thing. One of the other things that became interesting is this globalization of music. Composers could travel anywhere in the world and hear any group perform just about anything. Or, because we have record players now, they could hear a recording of just about anyone from anywhere in the world. And so composers began to be influenced by new styles of music or new groups that perform different ways, or even new sounds from countries that we had never heard music from before, and all of a sudden we have recordings. And Debussy and Philip Glass and John Cage were influenced by a lot of these recordings. So we'll listen to a bunch of music here, and we'll get on with our next chapter lectures. So this is just kind of an introduction to the 20th century and beyond.